Nora wasn't much interested in what Anthony had to say and had already begun to tune out the sound of his voice. But when he made the comment about taking her back, she looked up in surprise. "What?" He replied, "I can't make you part of my family. I forgive you, but your reputation is a mess. We can't get married, but I can buy you a mansion and take care of you for the rest of your life." She thought it was the most ridiculous thing she had ever heard. She said sarcastically, "You can't afford me." He was insulted. "I'm rich. I can give you $5,000 for living expenses every month. You can buy whatever you want with it." Nora snorted. $5,000 wasn't a small amount, but she knew that he could afford so much more than that. She was insulted that he thought she would stoop to accept his offer. Anthony stepped in front of her to keep her there. "Oh, so you do want to marry me then? Well, that might not be impossible. I might be able to make it happen if that's what you want." He gritted his teeth and went on. "All these years, Grandpa's been pushing me to marry you. Why not finally go through with it? Besides, you only have the one daughter. As long as she's obedient and doesn't get in the way of her future siblings, my rightful heirs, my family might be willing to consider it." He felt this was a generous offer. But Nora looked angry. "I would never put my daughter in that position." He frowned and said, "Don't push it, Nora. You can't expect us to make your daughter a real Grey and treat her like one of us." At that moment, a sharp voice suddenly reached them. "Nora, are you going after Anthony behind my back again?" It was Angela, storming across the room toward them. Her arms flailed in the air as she rushed at Nora. "I'm going to kill you." Anthony stopped her and shouted angrily, "What are you doing?" In the private room, Henry, Wendy, and Anthony's father heard the commotion and came out. Upon seeing the three of them, Henry yelled, "Nora, are you bullying your sister again? Apologize to her." Wendy also spoke up. "Nora, Anthony and your sister are discussing their engagement today. I know you're unhappy about it, but that doesn't mean you can come over and make trouble. You were the one that ruined your chances with him by getting pregnant before your marriage and damaging both families' reputation." Anthony stepped forward. "Henry, Wendy, Nora isn't to be blamed for that. The two of us are truly in love with each other. I'm willing to take her back." Angela's eyes widened. Hurt and sad, she took a step back. Henry was shocked. "Anthony, my daughter has been stubborn and contrary since she was a child. Don't fall for this. She ruined her own life. Don't let her ruin yours too." Wendy also nodded and said, "Besides, her mother's family are poor and insignificant. They even begged us for money today. Her relatives are trouble." But Anthony was still giving Nora looks. Wendy turned to Anthony's father and said, "Mr. Gray, you have to think carefully about this. We don't want your family to be implicated." Anthony's father's gaze fell on Nora. She was leaning against the wall, her posture lazy. Her cat-like eyes were slightly downcast, and she seemed to have a half-amused smile on her lips. She looked as if she found the whole thing both entertaining and entirely nothing to do with her. Anthony's father had been immersed in the business world for many years. He believed in being practical and using logic. His eyes darkened, and he said, "Marriage is a lifelong commitment. Let the children make their own decisions. Miss Smith, do you really want to be Anthony's wife?" At his words, everyone turned to look at Nora. She was surprised that he had actually asked to hear her thoughts. Maybe they were finally willing to listen to her. Nora lifted her head, and her lips curled up in a smile. She replied, "No, I don't." Everyone was dumbfounded. Anthony was the first to react. Furious, he demanded, "What do you mean by that, Nora?" She straightened her back and said clearly, "I mean that I am not interested in you." Anthony looked at her incredulously, as if he still didn't understand what she was saying. Angela, however, shouted, "What makes you think you can be so dismissive of Anthony? You make it sound like he's with you." Anthony finally came back to his senses. In his anger, his choice of words was also very malicious. "Nora, who are you interested in, if not me? Everyone who's anyone in California knows you cheated and got pregnant before our marriage. Apart from me, who else would marry like you?" Wendy sighed and said, "Is that really it, Nora? There's someone else? Don't go reaching too high. Do you really think you can do what your mother did? It was sheer dumb luck that someone like her could marry your father. Even if you are a little prettier than most, anyone with a decent family background will never take you as their wife." Wendy then changed the subject again and asked, "By the way, are you here for dinner with your aunt? Where is she? Your uncle needs money for his hospitalization fees, right? Are you short on money?" Just as Wendy hoped, Anthony's father frowned when he heard this. Suddenly, a gentle voice cut through the confusion. "Who says we don't have enough money for medical expenses?" The group turned and saw Melissa Anderson approaching them. The smile on her face didn't reach her eyes. She said, "Mrs. Smith, you don't have to worry about the hospitalization fees. Also, you don't need to bother yourselves with matters regarding Nora's marriage in the future, either. Our family will take care of it." Shocked, Anthony's father asked, "Your family? What family is that?" Melissa's lips curled up into a smile. Her voice was gentle, but what she said rang through the hall like a thunderclap. "The Andersons from New York." Anthony's father's eyes widened immediately. Even Henry and Wendy were so astounded that they couldn't say anything. They all stood in shock, wondering if they really had just insulted the revered Anderson family. While they were hesitating, Melissa fixed her gaze on Anthony again. After looking him up and down, she shook her head and said, "Let's go back to the private room, Nora. Don't keep your blind date waiting." She deliberately emphasized the words blind date. Nora knew that her aunt was trying to help her, so she went along with the lie and nodded, "Okay." The two finally turned around, only to immediately see Justin standing behind them. His eyebrows were raised, and his forehead was wrinkled in confusion, crinkling the mole at the corner of his eye. Incredulously, he repeated, "Blind date." While the adults were arguing, Cherry dragged Pete with her and snuck into the stairwell. She took off the scarf to reveal her face, panting heavily as she said, "That thing was suffocating. It's a good thing we weren't found out, Pete." Then she saw her brother pause and slowly lift his head. Cherry turned around and looked up. She saw Chester standing there, in disbelief, with his eyes wide. The hallway outside was bustling with all kinds of noise, but Pete, Cherry, and Chester all stood silently in the stairwell, not daring to make a sound. At last, after 30 seconds of staring at them, Chester pointed at Cherry as if he had seen a ghost and stammered, You. Pete pressed his lips together and sighed. "Since you've seen us, I guess we're going to have to tell you our secret." He said solemnly, "Uncle Chester, I have a superpower. I can create clones. If you don't believe me, close your eyes. I'll make her disappear." Chester was perplexed. The corners of his lips spasmed. "Do you really think I'm that stupid, Pete? I'm not falling for that." Cherry cupped her hands around her mouth and leaned towards her brother. She looked like she was trying to whisper, but her voice was in no way soft as she asked, "So, Uncle Chester has a brain after all?" Pete was also puzzled. "I'll look it up when I get back. Can single-celled organisms think?" Chester was speechless. "Are they talking about me?" But then he said triumphantly, "Your superpower doesn't make any sense. Any clones you'd make of yourself would have to be boys. How would you make a little girl version of yourself, huh? How does that work?" He was slowly realizing that, although the child was wearing a Spider-Man outfit, she might look like a little boy. It was, in fact, Nora Smith's daughter. Pete was perplexed. I guess single-celled organisms really do think differently, he thought. The two little kids looked at each other. Cherry tilted her head and asked, "What do we do, Pete? Do we silence him?" Pete hesitated. "He's my uncle. We shouldn't do anything bad." "Oh." Cherry sounded a little disappointed. Chester was confused and concerned. He said, "I have to tell Justin. You have a sister. He has a daughter. He ran out of the stairwell. Pete hurriedly called out, "Uncle Chester!" However, Chester didn't slow down. Cherry panicked. She placed her hands on her hips and yelled, "Don't you dare move, Chesty!" It was the tone of voice she used when leading raids in their video game. Chester froze on instinct. "Come back here." Chester obediently returned to the stairwell. He squatted down to look Cherry in the eye and exclaimed, "You're the game leader." Cherry placed her little hands under her chin and tilted her head. "Yes, that's right. I'm Sweet Cherry." Chester couldn't believe his leader wasn't Pete after all. He had been wrong about so much. He felt very deceived. Pete blurted out, "You can't tell Daddy about us, Uncle Chester." Chester was puzzled. "Why is that?" The boy was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Think about it. If Daddy knew Cherry's mum was the one who gave birth to me, what would he do?" Chester felt as if his brain cells weren't working. He said, "Her mum, the one who gave birth to you?" "Oh no. Do you mean Nora Smith? Nora's your biological mother." Chester finally understood why the two children didn't want him to tell Justin the truth. 5 years ago, Justin had suddenly brought a baby back and said that it was his son. When everyone asked who the child's mother was, he had flown into a rage. He had strictly forbidden anyone at home from ever mentioning the child's mother. At the time, they had all wondered what terrible thing the woman had done. Justin had looked as if he wanted to rip her into pieces every time she was mentioned. Cherry said, "Chesty, I want a father and a brother, but I also want Mummy. So we want them to fall in love first before we tell them. That way, we can all be together. Can you keep this a secret?" Chester shook his head. "No, I can't keep this a secret from Justin." Cherry instantly transferred into a grumpy little ogre. "If you tell Daddy, I won't bring you on our raids anymore." Chester was speechless. That's a serious threat. Melissa, Justin, and Nora took their seats in the elite VIP room in awkward silence. Melissa looked a little embarrassed as she explained, "I didn't mean anything by those blind date jokes, Justin. I was just trying to help Nora out of an awkward situation. Please don't misunderstand." The Hunts were family friends with the Andersons, but that didn't automatically put them on easy terms with Justin. Moreover, he was known for being a solitary figure who seemed to avoid dating entirely. Melissa didn't want to offend him. Justin was staring at Nora. Her eyes were downcast as she stirred the water in her glass, but she looked slightly bored. But her dazzling features and mysterious aura made it impossible to dislike her. He wasn't angry. He even had a smile at the corner of his eyes. "It's all right." Melissa and Justin chatted politely. When Melissa realized that Nora was going to New York with him the day after tomorrow, she smiled and said, "Nora, your uncle and I want to invite you to stay with us in New York." Her eyes looked sad as she went on. "Your grandmother has been crying so much ever since your mother's disappearance that she's lost her eyesight. She still talks about your mother. She would be overjoyed to have the chance to speak with you." On first hearing it, Nora intended to refuse the offer. But she didn't need to stay with them. But when she heard how it would affect her grandmother, she paused and said, "Okay." Their meal was served after that, and the three of them began to eat. Justin watched Nora as she attacked her plate. The way she ate was very interesting to him. She cut her meat into overly large pieces, but she didn't appear crude or awkward while chewing. Most women that Justin had dined with chewed their tiny bites slowly, but she finished the steak on her plate with great efficiency. He didn't know that Nora was eating quickly because she was in a hurry. Nora rarely slowed down for any activity, except spending time with Cherry. Melissa had only taken 4 bites when Nora placed her cutlery down. "Aunt Melissa, I'm so sorry, but I do have another appointment today. I'm afraid I have to leave you a little early." Melissa was surprised, but nodded. Laura left the elite VIP private room and checked her phone. When she saw Mrs. Lewis's text message saying that Cherry had already returned to their hotel room, she decided not to bother going upstairs to check. She hailed a cab and went out instead. Although she knew it wasn't appropriate to leave the meal so early, she really did have another appointment. 2 days ago, she had scheduled a meeting with Wayne Myers, the acting director of Idealian Pharmaceuticals. Her mother had entrusted him with the company, and he had managed it for over 20 years. When Nora arrived at the cafe, Wayne was already there. He stood up in excitement and said, "Look at you all grown up. How old are you now? 24? If only your mother could see you now, she would be so pleased." Wayne was a genuine and thoughtful man. He cared deeply about the company, but he understood that it wasn't really his, and he had always worked with the knowledge and intention of returning it to Nora when it was time. Nora nodded slightly in thanks. Then she took a seat and said, "Wayne, I asked you to meet me here today because I wanted to know if my mother has left me anything apart from the company. Or is there anything within the company that I need to know about?" She had already investigated this herself, but she hoped that Wayne might reveal something she had missed. Idealian Pharmaceuticals was a small company with an annual revenue of $5 million. Over the years, the firm had moved and changed its address a few times, but otherwise there seemed to be nothing out of the ordinary about it. She didn't quite understand why her father's family were so hung up over such a small company. Wayne solemnly nodded and answered, "Yes, she did." Nora looked up at him. "What did she leave me?" Nora's breath caught in her throat. Is the company really hiding something?
Please subscribe to the Pocket FM YouTube channel and press the bell icon for instant notification. Check out our channel for more such exciting shows.